regenerative agriculture. Sorry. To this webinar on regenerative agriculture. Before we start, maybe quickly show the agenda so you have an idea what the program is looking like. We have 3 speakers, Casper, Benjamin, and Alexander. Casper is, as you can see, from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the One Planet Business for Biodiversity. Benjamin is from the Boston Consulting Group, which was one of the co-authors of the 2 reports on regenerative agriculture in Germany and the USA, which is the topic of the main topic of this webinar. And with Alexander Klümper, a farmer from Eastern Germany, 500 hectares of land, who will be giving the farmer's perspective on regenerative agriculture. And then we have the Q&A session after the presentations. And Sophia, if you could show the slide with the housekeeping. Right, so during the presentations, if you have thoughts about a question or a comment, please put them in the Q&A. Please use the Q&A function. I know in almost every webinar I've attended, there's always people who use the chat. But please, you're meant to use the Q&A function. The chat is more to send comments to each other or general comments. But if you want your question to be put, use the Q&A function, please. And we're recording the session for the benefit of those who registered but finally cannot make it, or people who contacted me to say they would have loved to participate but can't for whatever reason. The recorded version will be put on our webpage afterwards so that it can be seen by those people, and of course by you, again, if you want to check things after this webinar. And now I think we can move over to the actual presentations. So the topic of this webinar is regenerative agriculture. And it's about the issue that regenerative agriculture, and in fact, almost any form of nature-friendly farming, there's always much the same comment. Especially from the farmer community, this is all fine and well to work for nature, and we love nature too. We're farmers. We love nature. We'd love to do something for nature. But all these things that you say that we should be doing, whether it's regenerative or agroecology or agroforestry or organic, whatever, it doesn't make business sense. It causes more work for us. It might raise our costs. It lowers our yields, and therefore it is a problem. That is a problem we cannot. That's why we can't. We feel we can't do it because it doesn't make business sense for us. And this webinar is about 2 reports that were recently published last year, looking at regenerative agriculture in Germany and in the USA, and seeing does it make business sense or not. And the findings are that it does, and that is what our presenters will explain. And so I'll give the floor first to Casper, who will give the general report and the USA aspects. Casper, the floor is yours.
Okay. I am going to share my screen, and if everything is correct, you should be seeing it now.
Yes.
Yes, good. So my name is Casper Zulem de Zwarte. I work for One Planet Business for Biodiversity. I am the senior manager there on advocacy and on strategic alliances. I'm fairly new. I started in August, so the work that I will be presenting was done before I came, so please bear with me if I make any mistakes. First, One Planet Business for Biodiversity. As the name already suggests, it is an action-oriented business coalition. So what we want to make business out of regenerative farming. That is our main goal. The coalition is really focused on scaling regenerative agriculture and developing an outcome-based, transparent reporting and advocating for a positive policy change. That's basically what we do. We have a bunch of members, and I need to change the screen here. Okay. Our members really are front-runner companies in regenerative agriculture. They're all large multinational companies who foster change and who foster change to nature positive food systems. It includes the entire food chain from and beyond, from pharma cooperatives, food and drink industry, fashion and cosmetics industry, and retailers, and also a series of enabling industries such as investors, banks, consultancy, and tech companies. So all these companies are really at the forefront of trying to change to regenerative agriculture. And it's an honor to work for them. So this regenerative agriculture, what is it? Well, if you follow, if you follow anything about regenerative agriculture in the news, there is always this discussion what it is. And to be quite frank, we have our own 5 principles, and this leaves a lot of space for diversity within what regenerative agriculture is. But according to us, regenerative agriculture should support farming livelihoods. That is one of the key points that differs us from others. It should increase biodiversity on the farm and protect and enhance it in and around farms. It should have improved water retention in soil. It should have healthy soils. It should reduce pesticide risk and reduce the necessity of input. And it's, well, overall, it is a sustainable farming. And what you see with regenerative agriculture, if you look at it in practice, you have companies that are and farms that are really at the deep end of regenerative agriculture, and you have farms and companies that are more on the shallow end, and anything in between. As far as we are concerned, this is all good. Everybody should make a step. Regenerative agriculture is more of a pathway than a very specific way of farming. What is important is that you adhere to those 5 principles, and what is very important is not to dilute those principles, and that is something that what the discussion is about. If you are against reducing nutrient use or against reducing pesticides, then it is very difficult for us to promote this as regenerative farming. It's okay, it is a step that everybody has to take, but our companies abide by those 5 principles. So why do all those large multinational companies are investing and invested in regenerative agriculture? Well, these companies, they are not just seeking profit. These are companies that really can drive a paradigm shift towards a more sustainable food system and bring it to scale. I think that is very important. These are companies that want to become really leaders and not followers in transition to regenerative agriculture. And what drives them, it is not just from the good of their heart, hopefully it is as well, but it's also just a sound business case. You see that number one, that there is an increasing risk in the supply chain. You need to be more and more resilient. You see there is biodiversity loss, water scarcity, and there is damage to the supply chain due to climate change. So there's a rapid growth of companies in agri-food and value chains that are including regenerative agriculture in their strategies to mitigate climate risk. Second reason why there are many companies involved in this is there is an increasing pressure for them to disclose on what they're doing to get to a net zero and also a nature positive supply chain. There is political drive for that. There is much more even a societal drive for it. Then the third reason is that there is a positive business outcome for this. So there is a financial drive towards a more regenerative food system. And I'll come to that on my next slide. And very important, there are more and more policy drivers to really make companies rethink their strategy and change to a more regenerative food system. So this is the grand scheme, but then how does this pan out for farmers? So this is something that we have developed last year with the Boston Consultancy Group. Benjamin will be talking about what has been done in Germany. We did it with some of his colleagues in the US side to look at farmers in Kansas, I think mostly corn farmers, and see what does business how does business change for them once they start transforming to regenerative agriculture. So what's going on there? Let me see. So there is a positive, let's start at the end. There is a positive business case for farmers. Conventional farming becomes less and less profitable because there is a higher risk for farmers due to climate change, and they need more and more mitigating measures to counter those effects of climate change. If you need to have more water on your land, it costs more money. It is very simple. Also, the yields are year after year decreasing. Maybe not at a single farm level, but overall it is. The FAO predicts that if we continue the way we do, that in 2050 we would have a 10% less yield worldwide than we have now. So very slowly you see that there is a change is necessary. So the transition to a regenerative agricultural system puts those farmers to a more and more profitable pathway. They are less dependent of input providers, and they will have more positive yields from crops, but also from alternative business models such as ecosystem services, carbon banking, and also for secondary crops. So there are more different ways to make money. You make more money because you have higher yields than your conventional counterparts, and you are less dependent on the input side, so you actually gain in profit, less costs. However, and this is the big but, it takes time. If you would transition now, then it takes 3 to 5 years before you actually start seeing that profit. And this is much of the critique that Anton was talking about. Just imagine you're a young farmer. You literally just bought the farm, so you've invested heavily. You are into debt. The former CEO of the farm is still living at the premises because that is your father. The CFO is your mother, and you need to talk to them and say, well, I'm going to make it different. I'm going to do it differently. That is already quite a challenge. And then you still have to see that you have to bridge that valley of death of 3 to 5 years where you actually make less profit. So there is a positive business case, but it will take time, and you need to find that time to do it. And this is where we come in as OP2B and WBCSD. Oh, first, if you want to read more about the research, you can scan this QR code. So the key findings are that there is a positive business case. You can change. It's 15 to 25% better than staying on an industrial agricultural pathway. However, financial support is needed, technical support and know-how is needed to make this transition actually happen. And you need to have that, you need to bridge that gap for 3 to 5 years. So we took this because we are OP2B and we're WBCSD. We took these outcomes to the COP28, which was just before Christmas. And we had a discussion with the world leaders there on this rooftop, business leaders, banking leaders, and see, okay, if you see those results? What are your feelings about this? So, outcome based on this rooftop is that regenerative farming solutions exist. We know that they exist, but they are still on small scale, and that they are more profitable. You see that throughout the world. You see that scaling up is necessary, but it requires really a collaboration between investment parties, supply chain actors in a pre-competitive way, and also government actors. Key here are farmers. They are the ones that are really lifting the heavy burden of this transition, and we need to see how can we help them bridge that 3 to 5 year gap. How can we come up with a finance package that works for them? And there was a very loud call for action to have a public-private partnership to fund the change to regenerative agriculture. And a day later, we started working on an action agenda for regenerative landscapes, also launched at COP, really to see how can we make this this positive business model work for farmers. So what we need to do is bring together agri-business partners, farmers, banks, and other financiers insurance companies. We need to talk to civil society. We need to see with national and local governments, really to see how can we scale up regenerative agriculture in such a way that it is profitable for everybody. So this is the promise that we made, and we are following up on that. We are now looking on what can be done on farm level, on landscape level, both for the short term and the long term. And well, we know what this puzzle should look like. We know that supply chain actors can offer premium and long-term contracts to help farmers bridge that gap. We know that a different way of farming requires a different way of banking. We know that banks and insurance companies need to reevaluate the way they measure risks and how they can provide a better financial package for farmers. We need policymakers to refocus agricultural policy and payments to a more outcome-based approach. What we see now is that it is either land-based, the more land you have, the more money you get, or that it is really on inputs. So what you do with that land, you get a little bit of a premium. No, we need to shift to a more outcome-based approach, looking at carbon sequestration, look at biodiversity, look at water retention too, because those are the indicators that actually help climate and nature the most. And we still need to be able to make that puzzle. We know what the pieces are. We don't know how the pieces look like yet. This is what we're going to do in the coming months as OP2B. And we are going to see in Europe, at least, how can we scale up existing pilots to something sizable like 50,000 hectares or maybe 1,000 farmers. And this is what we're going to work on. And the key here for us is to make that positive business model that we know is out there. How do we make that work for farmers, that they actually can profit from it? So this was my short pitch. And if you have any comments or questions, you can always contact me, of course.
Well, thank you, Casper. That was really inspiring. And actually, in our Eurosite Agriculture, Biodiversity and Climate Working Group, we have plenty examples of small-scale regenerative agriculture, which is a success. But yes, you're right, scaling up is a big problem. And we also are very much in favor of outcome-based or results-based, as we call it. So there we're on the same wavelength as you are, an outcome-based payments for ecosystem services and agri-environment. No. And we are civil society. So, and you said you want to talk to us. So I think we have, I can see things where we can continue to work together, but that's for after the webinar. And now I want to give the floor to the next speaker, Benjamin.
Yes, hey everyone. As a brief note of introduction, Ben Suba. I'm a partner at Boston Consulting Group, taking care for agriculture business. So, do a lot of work with our clients in the different farm input industries and also coordinating the activities on climate and nature in agriculture. Therefore, I've been co-authoring a study on regenerative agriculture in Germany, which we have done together with the NABU, sort of the German subsidiary of BirdLife International. And let me quickly walk you through the key findings we had on that study. I hope you can all see now my screen. Very good. So first and foremost, that obviously has been a meta study. So we have not run on field trials or other experiments, but have been summarizing a lot of scientific work and practical evidence that is available in the market. And we went in with a strong hypothesis that there is a benefit of regenerative agriculture for all relevant stakeholders. And happily, we could prove what we could call sort of a triple win, because there is a potential of regenerative agriculture to improve farmer economics. Now and I get to that in more detail in a minute. We figured out that there is a potential to increase farm profitability significantly, so by up to 60%. There is obviously
Benjamin,
yes.
Excuse me, just to interrupt. Could you get rid of your toolbar on your side screen, because it'll be easier for the audience to see your actual slide if it covers the whole screen.
Yes, give me 1 second. So it was probably simply the wrong monitor which I shared. Now it should be in full screen. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Anton, for pointing me on. Have been ended. Secondly, and that's the middle block, we looked at what's the value that can be unlocked for society. And there's obviously large value for the, let's say, ecosystem impact, talking in particularly about carbon, about biodiversity, and the water impact of agriculture. We'll also deep dive on that in a second. And lastly, on the right-hand side, there is a positive impact for what we could call the downstream food value chain, so food producers and retailers. And maybe let me start with that one, because it's obviously least eminent. When we look into Germany in particular, we have here on the left-hand side the example of wheat. Since the 1960s, we have a very nice development of the wheat yield with a CAGR of more than 2.5% year-on-year increase in yield. When we, however, look at the last 15 years, that development has flattened. And it has probably not been flattened because there is no innovations anymore from the fertilizer, the seed, the ag equipment industry. No, there are innovations, but there is also much more tremendous severe weather years. That is what you see in these 4 peaks, where you have particularly bad weather years, like we had in 2018, where the wheat yield has been up to 30% lower compared to the long-term average. And that is obviously to some extent linked to the climate change and what we expect. You see it here on the dotted line, to continue and maybe even worsen in the future. So the agronomic paradigm needs to shift from aiming at ever-increasing top yield potential, more to realize a stable yield corridor in a more severe weather environment. And this is where regenerative agriculture comes into play, because obviously regenerative farming on the one hand improves the soil organic matter content. And just remember, you in a humid climate like Europe, 1 ton of additional carbon in the soil is equivalent to about 2.6 ton of additional water holding capacity, meaning that the soil is and farming is much more resilient over temporary periods of heat and drought stress in summer. And this is how regenerative agriculture can help to lower the impact of the yield peaks, which you see going down at the severe weather years. And I think that's sort of the main aspect for today, at the farm level impact. So we have started, as I said, in this meta study, from putting together all the state level farmer P&L structures, which you find from the German Chamber of Agriculture, published on a state level, and we averaged it, coming to the conclusion that the per hectare profit based on 2019 years have been about 355 euros, given the German crop mix of a lot cereals blended with oil seeds, some 10-15% corn, and so on. And on that basis, we have taken the scientific studies and practical examples to say, okay, what is sort of the positive impact of regenerative agriculture, and also what is the downside? And then we modeled, okay, what is sort of farmer savings across different implementation stages. And obviously the biggest, without going through the line items here one by one, the biggest impact which we have figured out is obviously, on the one hand, cost of avoidance from no-till farming. So there's a lot of machine hours and diesel engaged in tillage. So very interestingly, with the current, let's say, legislative discussions to cancel out the subsidies for agriculture fuel in Germany, that may even be a, let's say, booster for regenerative farming in the very end. Nevertheless, that's number one. Number two is obviously cost avoidance from nitrogen fertilizer, as by the application of cover cropping, undersown crops, and biological nitrogen fixation, there is a reduction potential of up to 35% of nitrogen fertilizer in a longer crop rotation scheme, not on a single year basis. And then we have contrasted that obviously with additional operational effort for seeding cover crops, which additional pocket costs or out-of-pocket costs for buying the cover crop seed and so on, and calculated in what I've shown one slide before, slightly higher yield resilience in severe weather years, and then adding all that up, coming to a conclusion that this can, after a implementation stage, and that is what you see in this top green bar, which we said will be probably 6 years plus, bring tremendous value to the farmer P&L. More details are obviously available in the report, which you can find online and download. However, and that's a little bit the flip side of the coin, a lot needs to be done in order to unlock that potential and increase the adoption of regenerative agriculture in Germany. And there we really see it as, I always like to refer to it as team sport, where many players in the value chain and stakeholders need to become active. So there is a need for direct farmer support, and Casper, thanks for pointing that out. Agronomic advice, education, training, and support on the transition from conventional to regenerative agriculture is one key element there, where the public and private sector agronomic advisory really need to step in. There's also a lack, I would say, on research on the impact of soil health and crop yield and farm productivity. Literally the entire farm input industry in the last years has almost 200% focused on looking at crop health and how to protect against pathogens. Aspects around the impact of soil health have been much less in focus. Then there is in the middle column certainly a need for governmental action and tailored subsidies. I think to some extent the new CAP, the Common Agriculture Policy in Europe, is going in that direction, as 25% of the subsidies will be linked to so-called eco schemes, and on a member state basis, many of these eco schemes throughout Europe are sort of linked to regenerative agriculture practices like deployment of no-till farming, use of cover crop, and so on. Nevertheless, that can be obviously much more nuanced and tailored. Yeah, and last but not least, there is also I would say a need for further investment and support of the food industry and the downstream industry. I think most of the, how we call it, CPG, consumer packaged goods companies have pretty bold decarbonization targets, including their own so-called Scope 3 emissions, meaning all the emissions coming from their value chain. And to reduce these emissions, obviously regenerative farming is one of the key drivers they can really do. And helping their farmers, so their suppliers, to embark on that journey through, for instance, long-term contracts for regeneratively grown produce, also by investment support, by making inputs available, and so on, will be a key role. So key message from my end before we then move on: there is a triple win of regenerative agriculture for farmers, for the food industry, and for the society. It, however, takes time to be unlocked, and it requires a lot of support to accelerate that adoption. And just as a fun fact, we also talked to many growers. One of the key reasons for many growers not to farm regeneratively or embark on that transition is really that there is a need to invest 100,000 euro for a direct seeding machine. And without a direct seeding machine, all the no-till farming practices remain simple theory. And if we get either from the customer side, so the food industry or the government, targeted subsidies to support growers in making that one-off investment, I think that will create a very steep increase in adoption of regenerative agriculture. Very good. I think at that stage, I'm done with the key messages and looking very much forward to the Q&A part thereafter.
Right. Well, thank you, Benjamin. And again, I was struck by some of the things you said, that they overlap with what we are doing in our ABC group, and that the organizations represented in the ABC group are doing. And I was particularly interested in what you were saying, that we need advice to farmers and training. And that advice would, I presume, would include advice about conservation and about sustainable resource use. And that is where we have a lot of expertise, of course. And also the idea of, you mentioned networking for regenerative agriculture via NGOs, which again seems to point to us, and we'd be glad to help there. And we ourselves have developed the idea that farmers talking to other farmers, in other words, farmers who are already doing regenerative farming and are making a success of it, they are the best people to go and talk to the farmers who are still a bit skeptical or not sure about it, because peer-to-peer is the way forward. And that's something we're actually thinking a lot about now, we call it mentoring, and we're thinking about working in that direction this year. So again, I can see possibilities for us to do things together. And that's very inspiring. But now I will give the floor to the last speaker, Alexander, the farmer from Eastern Germany. Alexander, your turn now.
Okay, do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, I'm going to give the farmer's perspective, a little bit more the background, what is really happening in the soil, what is happening in the environment, but as well at the finish line, troubleshooting and policy we have to deal with. So I'm a no-till farmer, grain farmer in Eastern Germany in a dry area. And I will explain you why no-till will automatically lead the farmer to regenerative farming. Why tillage is the biggest harm to the soils and environment, and why it will not lead to a prosperous future. So very quick, I'm not going too much into detail here. There's many different sectors of regenerative farming. So like you can do it in the forest, on the grassland, in the garden, different kinds of what I'm going to talk about, because where I have my knowledge, is the arable farm in no-till farming. But in total, we need all these different sectors, because all the sectors are producing different kinds of foods. And the good thing is the first two, what you're seeing here, the forest and the grassland, well, in the end, in a normal way, they already do no tillage. There's just other things they can improve. The difficulties are when we have annual crops, because then in between we need to get rid of the weeds, and then it's a question, how do we do it? Do we do it with any tillage or not? And as well, there's plenty mixed forms. I'm going to start directly with the advantages of no-till. So we have, it's a bit mixed with all the studies all over the world, but it's about 99.9% less erosion. So in the end, the erosion is even less than the soil new building. So we had a balance that we're building soil. And we have the high food production. And when you think, let's say, organic farming, when you need double the area to produce the same amount of food, and you're having way more tillage, then you're maybe having 4 times more food loss for one table what you're eating. No burning of soil organic matter, instead we're building some. There's a study from Australia. It says about 800% more biodiversity, as well as a study from Brazil, what is proving this. And it goes really the whole chapter from insects, spiders, birds, all the wildlife in general. We're seeing species back on our farm that we haven't seen before. We're saving energy in any kind, depending on what you were doing before. If you were plowing or min-till, we're saving between 40 and 70% diesel. We use between 10 and 40% less fertilizer. So this is for German perspective. There's different climates where you can even save more. Don't save fertilizer in the first 2 years. Don't do that, because your whole system is transitioning. What we discovered is between 20 and 70% less pesticides. So some friends of mine, they are doing this since 20 years. They are really getting close to the 70%. We can see the longer we do this system, the more we save. And mainly we're saving the insecticides and fungicides, because just our crops are healthier. They don't need it anymore. They just don't get sick. And if you ever find pesticides in the food, usually it is insecticides and fungicides, because that is what is applied later when the plant is already big. So it's applied later, closer to harvest. So the only thing what we are not reducing that much, but as well we're reducing it, is the herbicides. And they are applied very early in the plant grow when they are very small. And as much as I know, in the last year, they didn't found one sample in Germany where they could prove any herbicides in the food. Yeah, the whole food security is better, because we're building soil and we are just more climate resilient. All this together saves money and increases the income. So in the end, I can pretty much say I'm spending around 100,000 euro less on my farm. But as well, because we are changing the crop rotation, and then we're trying different crops, and sometimes we discover, well, maybe the first year this new crop was good, but the second it wasn't, and the third one again it wasn't. So this trial and error as well can cost money. And I think pretty much around 5 to 10 years we know this very exact. But so just from my example on my farm in a very dry area where no-till really helps us saving water, we made more money from the first year on. But I was at a place where I needed to exchange my drill anyway. So many machines were at a point where I could say, okay, this is done now, and just instead of buying a new drill, a new cultivator, a new disc, I just bought a expensive no-till drill. So I didn't really have more expenses in that moment. We have a higher nutrient and vitamin density in food, around 50% higher. There were 2 studies in, I think, 22 done in the United States. It mainly has to do because we are not disturbing the fungus in the soil. And when we have a healthier soil, we have the healthy plants, as I already explained it, and healthy animals and humans as well. And most chronic diseases are linked to mineral deficiency. So I guess we can do a lot of goods there. Water management is a very complex topic. The soils in no-till are cooler because we have them covered. So we have less evaporation. And that would mean in plenty areas that we don't need to irrigate, and then we don't have salinization. So there, I was in Querétaro in Mexico. They could already see the salt levels going down, and they didn't even do 100% no-till yet. We have less floodings because the water gets into the soil instead of running up. And we don't have this useless evaporation. Increasing the water table, where we have a lack of water, that means the water is not in the ocean, it's in the groundwater. We have cleaner water, and all this benefits the small water circles. That means if you have a tilled soil, this is like a powder, like flour. When it rains on there, the water stays on top in this mud. It doesn't sink into the soil. That means with the next sun, it's evaporating again. So that means once you have rain again and rain again and rain again. You have an extreme climate. But once it's dry, there was nothing saved in the soil for that moment, and the plants can no more transpirate and evaporate, and you're not building new clouds. There's studies done in Canada where they changed big areas to no-till, and the climate is way less extreme right now. And as well, there's different studies. I mean, it's not 100% proven yet, but I'm not sure if I'm saying the word right. The fertile crescent, in German we call it a fertile half moon, like 1,000, 2,000 years ago. They destroyed it with tillage. It became desert. And just thinking, well, it was not the pesticides, the fertilizer that did it. It was the tillage. So what is no-till? Well, in the end, no-till only works when you follow the principles of conservation agriculture. That means do not disturb the soil, so don't do any tillage. Have your soil covered and have a good crop rotation and cover crop mixtures, what means diversity. In the end, it's very simple. Once we bring oxygen into the soil and destroy the soil particles, and the oxygen can get into the soil particles, we are burning carbon in that moment. And here you can see the left is always the MP is the mobile plow, the plowing, and MT is no-till. So from the left to the right, you see they do less intense tillage till no-till. And very quick, the first 5 hours very intense, but still the first 24 hours we have a very big leaching of CO2, and that happens in a moment where there's no plant that can use this CO2. I mean, most of the CO2 in no-till will get released later during the year, but in a moment where the plant needs it. That means during the year in the microclimate, you have a higher CO2 level under the plants, and they need to open their stomata a bit less. That means they don't need to breathe that much, and that will help them using less water. But as well, in the moment we're releasing all the CO2, we are releasing all these other minerals like nitrogen, potassium, manganese, all these micronutrients as well. And there's no plants that can take them up. And because of this, with the next rainfall, we will lose a lot of minerals to the groundwater. So quick proof, different studies, very long term. They didn't even do too much. They didn't know back then about regenerative agriculture. It was a very simple no-till. It was not even conservation agriculture, but they were still building soil organic matter. Here's another one. And here's one from Brazil, where they could even increase the soil organic matter down in the soil, because often it says no-till is only increasing it in the top layer, but as well, if you give it time, you can increase the whole level. Here's a study done from a German university. They wanted to prove how bad glyphosate is and how bad the no-till system is for all the animals and the environment. I have been on this farm in Paraguay, and I know Rolf Deabsch, who was supporting this back then from the German GTZ. On the left, green, you see the native bushland and how much, I think it's a bit a mix of the diversity and the total amount of animals. And yellow, you can see kind of what most people call a monoculture. You can see with the fertilizer, with the pesticides. So it was not really way less animals there. And the only difference between the yellow and the red is that in red they did tillage. So this study was still done back then in the 90s. They didn't reduce all the pesticides that much yet in the no-till in the Siembra Directa. Big trouble is on the right side, you see this soil particles. They are held together by glomalin, what is made by fungus. Fungus is destroyed by tillage, and as well, these particles are destroyed by tillage. And on the left, you have this, what I already explained, what is a bit like flour. So through this flour, when it's warm, it's hot, the water doesn't get in, and it compacts, and as well oxygen doesn't get in, and then you have not a good soil life. You don't have this aerobic soil life, what can help our plants being healthy. What I just said about the water, you can see on the left side there was no-till, on the right side there was tillage. The water doesn't get in. The blue line is the leach of nitrate. The study done in Germany a long time ago, and the orange one is in a plowing system. In the total, you can see in no-till it was 300 ppm, and the plowing all in sum up was a double, it was 600. And pretty much the same happens with any different pesticides, herbicides, so on, what we can use. Around half what goes down if we would use the same amount. But when we only use half, then we only lose a quarter to the groundwater. On the left is a picture what my friend Wolf made back in the 60s in Iguazu waterfalls between Brazil, Paraguay, and Argentina. And on the right side, you can see how it looks now. Back then, they could really see all the times when they did the tillage, the soil after it was wet by the soil, and even in the hydro dams, they could measure the amount of soil in the big rivers. Here an example from my farm. On the left side, you can see my corn. On the right, you see the corn from the neighbor. He plowed. And in the middle, there's a ditch, and there's still water in there, maybe like, let's say 80 centimeters deep. And on the right side, the corn was not able to go through the plow pan to have access to the water. And my corn was still growing. So in this extreme years, it was 2018, a very dry year. We had really big advantages compared to the conventional system. But as well, I have to say, well, my roots were going very deep, and we had 2 dry years in a row. So I really emptied my soil of water, and they were a bit an advantage a year after when the rain was coming before. So I had 2 good yields, years with 2 good 2 good years with good yield after they had 1 good year. About the study that I mentioned, this one is from David Montgomery, Seattle. They measured many different things. So some even this alpha-linolenic acid, if you do the whole system together with the animals, that you use the animals to graze the cover crops, and then the other times putting them on grassland. Some were even increasing like 11 times, but many other things were just increasing between 15, 20, 30, 40%. So in average for most things, you can say the content was 50% higher. And it was another one done from the Penn State. The results were similar. But as well, here it's saying very clear, this down there you see this longevity vitamin is produced by fungus. So if we destroy the fungus with the tillage, we have trouble. Challenges of no-till. Well, centuries of soil tillage have really degraded the soil. So with the destruction of the fungus and the oxidation of the soil organic matter, minerals went into the water-soluble form, and it was good for the plant grow at the short term. That's why we kept doing it, because everybody thought, okay, tillage is good, the plants are growing good. But we didn't see it has bad effects in the long term because the minerals washed out. So that means the soils are pretty empty right now. And if you now change this and stop mineralizing the minerals, then the plants have a difficulty to reach them. So the colder the climate is, so usually the farmers close to the equator, they don't have this trouble that much in the conversion to no-till. But the more we go to the north, more we see those things. And when your soils are not too rich, they have a low carbon exchange capacity, and it's not really balanced good. Cold soil, small seeds, they show it very quick, like oilseed rape, and seeds that like it warm, like corn, and a small plant, then you can have a risk of a poor plant grow. And in the end, it's a little bit our soils they are on drugs, and the drug is tillage. And like any drug, if you stop it, it leads to a withdrawal. And to prevent this, we are using tools like the Kinsey soil test to balance the nutrients. We give foliar nutrients onto the leaves, seed dressing, so directly on the seed and close to the seed. What is unfortunately no more allowed in Germany, at least not for all the crops, but it would help a lot. And inoculation of biology. So we figured all these things out during the last 10, 15 years. And now that we have these tools, we can pretty much prevent this trouble to happen, that the plants are not growing at the beginning, because it can really happen. I've seen it at some places on my farm, on a friend's farm. When you don't know those things, then the people start talking, no-till is not working, no-till is not working. And unfortunately, mainly I saw it on farmers that got subsidies to buy a no-till drill, because they thought, I get money for the drill, so I have to start no-till, but their mind was not ready. They didn't have the knowledge yet. Normally the farmers, once they have the knowledge, they look what they're doing and they really go into the topic and find solutions. Well, the biggest challenge what we have, at least for me talking from a German perspective, is all the regulations, because they're taking away the possibilities and taking away tools that we need for the system. Because all those regulations, just to say like this, the regulations are meant for a system that is driving, I don't know, is driving a motorbike, but not driving a car, or opposite, however you see it. And this system doesn't fit in there. And as diverse as all these farm types are, the soils and the climates are more diverse. What is working on my farm, the crop rotation I'm using, doesn't work 50 kilometers away. It doesn't fit there. And another 50 kilometers away, it fits even less. So there's a lot of research have to be done by the farmers, because the universities and so on, they don't do this. Well, this is what brings us a little bit risk in the first few years. This research, what we have to do by ourselves, and really this, what you already said, this peer-to-peer, this is what really is helping. We met farmers groups by ourselves and educating each other, and like the school teachers and the universities and all these consultants, they have zero clue of this system. They are telling us it's not working and that's it. And now they slowly realize, oh, there's farmers who are doing it and it is working. In the end, the top-down regulations, they cause more harm than good. Germany is going more and more into regulation, into little detail, and well, the less is possible to do the right thing, the more we regulate things. Two quick examples from Germany. We are not allowed to put fertilizer in winter. What is totally right at my brother's farm in West Germany with a lot of rainfall, and when you do the tillage, then you would have nutrients leaching into the groundwater table. We don't want that. But in no-till, the difficulty is to get the fertilizer into the soil. So mainly means if you're using organic fertilizer, it stays on top. And from the law, we have to apply it in spring. And that means it stays on top, then it becomes dry and doesn't get into the soil and become gas. That's the law, what they're telling us. As well, the nitrogen law, what is calculating on the fields, well, we have to follow it. They are allowing me to put way too much fertilizer on my very bad fields, on my very sandy soils, but they are not allowing me to put enough fertilizer on my good soils. The old system of the nitrogen balance left way more decision and possibility at the farmers. That would be a law that would be based on the outcome, and it's not based on telling you exactly every little detail what you have to do. So the regulations have to be depending on the outcome. Why it's not happening faster? So, well, in farming, the thing is the learning curve is always 1 year. What I do wrong in this fall with the seed, I will have the result with the next year's harvest. So 10 years experience, I had only 10 chances to learn with trial and error. And this with different conditions each year, with a different climate, different rainfall, and things are being multifactorial. So changes take time in agriculture. Planning and investment security. So I'm pretty sure we have more than 1,000 farmers in Germany. So what is more than 1% of the farmers, but probably more than 5% of the land. They are very interested into doing no-till farming and going regenerative. I hear this on all my speaks that I'm holding, even if I talk about precision farming, what has nothing to do with regenerative farming. They come to me, they tell me, when I take over the farm, I want to go no-till. But damn, the last 3 years, we had no clue what will happen with glyphosate. So when you don't know if you can still run this system, you will not invest into a no-till drill. For what? So they were waiting 3 years, 4 years, waiting. This is a thing we need, security, and we don't need policies that change all the time. 1 year they want this, the other year they want that, the next year they want this. The drill that I built will live longer than me. So it has done, I think now like 6,000 hectares. I have a friend in New Zealand. He has a same drill half size. It was working around 50,000 hectares. So it can theoretically, if the electronic doesn't get broken, work for the next century, pretty much. It doesn't help me if the policy is changing things in 4 years. And that is not sustainable. This is wasting when they change things all the time. And bureaucracy. Most of the farmers, they don't even have the time to educate themselves. We're wasting so much time in the office filling really useless forms. And every 3 months comes something new, a new office that wants another form from us. That takes us another much of time to find all the data. And in the end, all this, sorry to be so honest, bullshit, it doesn't help the environment. It brings nothing to the environment and just wastes our time. So pretty much the laws that we had 10 years ago, they already fulfilled good things. Everything what came after, it's just bureaucracy. So, and yeah, it leads to practices that look good on paper, but not in reality. In the end, it's all greenwashing what they want. Yeah, what's regenerative and whatnot? This is my last page. Unfortunately, what I've seen during the last few years, the more the word regenerative becomes more popular, the more it is used as well for greenwashing and snake oil salesmen out there. I mean, obviously, we need companies that produce the things that we want, but there's many are just smelling their business. And as Oscar Wilde says, all popular is wrong. That's not what I would say. Regenerative is right. But if it is really regenerating and not just on the paper. There's another quote, hell is full of good meanings, but heaven is full of good works. Or as we say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. What I see lately is that many people want to force some change, but they have no clue of what they're doing. And when these people decide what is gonna happen, it doesn't lead to anything good. It will lead to trouble and make things often worse. And for example, our Green Party, probably in Germany, they have many good intentions, but they're doing many things that will lead to bad results. Yeah, there's a number of things of stimulants that help you to grow soil faster. But if you do that in a tillage system, it doesn't help you to build it if you burn it again. So, for example, imagine you're building a house and every year somebody comes and tills it down again and it destroys it. It's not a good help if you learn how to build the house faster. You need to stop that person destroying it. But if you do both, if you stop the person destroying it and you learn how to build faster, then something good can come out. And as well, something what we see pretty often that farms are calling themselves regenerative, but in reality, they live from a very high input from, let's say, compost, from external sources. So they're not building it by themselves. They're taking it from outside and then burning it with tillage. But on the paper, it still looks good. They maybe have increasing numbers of soil organic matter, but in reality, they were burning it like crazy and taking it away from other farmers. So that's from me to this point, and looking forward for the F&A later.
Well, thank you, Alexander. That was very eloquent, and it's great to hear from somebody who knows what they're doing because you've done it. It's all you're clearly you've got this practical experience. And yes, what you were saying towards the end about too much regulation, micromanagement, policies that are well-intentioned but have all sorts of perverse effects because they're not well designed. That's very familiar, yes, and it's something we've also been looking at in our group, and we might want to do something about the rules and regulations sometime this year. So in that case, we'll certainly be back to you because you've given some interesting examples there. But now, as we go to the questions, and there are 14 questions waiting for you. So, Sophia, you're taking the questions. So it's up to you now.
Yes, thank you, Anton, and thank you for the very nice and inspiring presentations. We have a question. It's more a financial one. how to manage the risk of companies investing on regenerative agriculture just to later push the prices of the raw materials down and disencouraging farmers to start the transition. Maybe Casper or Benjamin.
Could you repeat the question, because I didn't really get it?
Yes. So how to manage the risk of companies investing on regenerative agriculture just to later push the prices of the raw materials down and disencouraging farmers to start the transition?
Yes, because the idea behind it is that if the cost of cultivation is lower because of less inputs, that means that instead of farmers having more profit, they could be forced to accept lower sales prices because the food is cheaper.
Yeah. Well, in the end, it depends all on the supply chain, of course. I think that for now, in the transition period, that supply chain actors like the large companies that I represent have a moral obligation to pay premium to cover the transition costs. And many of the companies do that. Large companies, I also work with some of the smaller companies. You see that if they change to regenerative agriculture or any form of sustainable agriculture, that most of them now know we need, at least for the coming years, to have a price premium. So that would help farmers to make the transition. On the other hand, as I understand the question, I can also understand that input providers would lower the cost of input. So to keep being relevant for those farmers, I would say if you look for the long-term investment, and I know farmers do that, companies, they think in terms of 5 years or maybe a decade. Farmers tend to think in 30 years, because that's how long it takes to earn back your loan. If you look at those long terms, I think regenerative agriculture is definitely a better way to go than the status quo. And then it doesn't matter if your input provider is giving you a discount. You just need to change if you want to. If you want to farm, you can do it probably for the next 30 years. If you want your children to farm as well, you need to change, and you need to do it now.
Yeah, and maybe to add on that, just one aspect, I think it very much depends on the crop and the value chain. Yeah, there is some crops in mature markets, like, I don't know, potatoes being used for French fry or chips production, where regenerative farming really becomes like a hygiene factor, because there's a couple of companies literally owning that market, and potatoes are more or less farmed in a contract farming type of fashion. So the farmers need to, simply saying, adhere to the standards defined by the off-taker. Yeah, but for the majority of markets, as you said, Caspar, I mean, the prices for the goods are made at global commodity markets, and not in a direct interlinkage of an off-taker and a farmer. Yeah, so fully echo what you said.
Thank you. There's another question, quite connecting to this, is will retailers accept slimmer margins and or customers accept higher prices to maintain agricultural incomes when deciding between different goods?
That is a very dynamic question from my point of view. Yeah, I think 3 years from now, that there would be a clear, or we typically do a research where we peel the onion in a certain way by asking consumers, is sustainability important for you when taking a buying decision? Then do you particularly go for a more sustainable brand or product? And when it's then on the third level, peeling the onion, the question, are you willing to pay a premium actively for a more sustainable product? Then you get the real truth. And while 80% or so of consumers say, hey, obviously, of course, sustainability is key for my buying decision, literally across the board globally. Yeah, only some 5 to 10% are really willing at this stage to pay a premium. And I would say with the food price inflation, which we have observed in Europe in the last 2 years, it's probably even at the lower end of that corridor, unfortunately. Huh?
Thanks. So the next question is from Bill Grayson, and I think it was mainly targeted to Alexander. And it was considering the leveling of wheat yields. And the question is whether it can be due to soil degradation linked to high inputs of artificial fertilizers, and whether the pests and diseases could develop a resistance to the chemicals introduced.
I think that was about the chart that was in Benjamin's presentation. But probably,
yes, I might be.
Yes. To my opinion, probably it plays a part of it. Definitely.
Yeah. I think there's two aspects to it, right? On the one hand, we see more severe weather events, Alex, as you also point out with the 2018 example of extraordinary drought in Germany. And on the other hand, due to all, Bill, that you have put in the question, there is negatively impacted resilience or resistance of our cropping system to stand up against that more harsh stress conditions of heat and drought. Yeah, so it's probably spiraling up a little bit, but I would emphasize that probably the weather effect is a key driver from our point of view. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And a question considering specialist machinery. It is that the high capital costs for specialist machinery and equipment make it too hard for smaller farmers to transition to regenerative practices, even with some financial help from grants.
I think that's also here to what I said with a direct seeding equipment. Yes, I think that is actively holding back some farmers. However, when you look at the bigger picture, then in a no-till environment, the horsepower of the tractor fleet can also be significantly lower, right? I mean, what is currently determining the need for horsepower on a field is to a good extent the tillage or soil preparation. So I would argue that in a longer term, the capex investment need in a regenerative system is not higher than in a conventional system. Yeah, it's more like getting over this hurdle of a one-time investment into a direct seeding machine.
And to be quite honest,
Alexander, you probably have also first-hand experience with that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I would add. So I've plenty of farmers really with a few hectares that are asking me like, how can I start? So on, we have big WhatsApp groups and Telegram groups with 1,400 people. So we're already organizing that they meet up locally with other farmers and they buy a drill together. Or sometimes it even works. Well, the contractors, they don't like it too much because they know once they start no-till, they have less other work. But there are possibilities. But yes, short term for a small farm, the starting point is difficult. That's right.
And I think there are two economic levers here. First of all, if it is too expensive for small farmers, that means that there is a business model to lease this kind of equipment. So in the end, there will be new players on the market if the market is growing for regenerative agriculture to provide services there. So that's one thing. And on the other hand, banks, I already said, a different way of farming requires a different way of banking. The difficulty is not that new equipment is expensive. Yes, that is difficult. But also, if you already invested in old equipment for an old way of farming, you need to depreciate that and the loan as well. And I think this is where some banks are already starting to think, okay, how can we make sure that farmers can make this transition, even though that they have a long-term loan for us, for instance, for one of those heavy-duty tractors which are no longer necessary. but this is still very much at the beginning of development.
Thank you. Thanks for answering. The next question is to Alexander mainly. And the question is, how do you deal with weed burden with no-till system? Are you using more glyphosate?
So we don't use much than before in the min-till system. In total, we can see that the level of weeds is decreasing during the years. It's changing a bit. Like, for example, before we had a big trouble with brome grass. And if you would be in a higher yield area, you would have black grass. They disappear during the years. But then plants that use a mycorrhizal fungus network, like what's the English name? Geranium.
Yeah.
They come more. Geranium. They come more. So in total, we use less herbicides as well. We changed that we only spray very early in the morning or almost in the night when we have a high humidity. So a high water level in the air, so the drops, they survive longer on the plant. This helps us reducing all the pesticides, again, like 20-30%. There's no wind, so it cannot blow up to any ditches. So most years we can deal with less than 1 liter per hectare of the 360 gram glyphosate. So this is 10%. So we need less than 10% what we are allowed to use. And now that we're at the glyphosate topic, I quick answer the next question about the glyphosate. Somebody was asking, because it was found in samples of urine from MEPs. I'm just not sure what is MEPs, but what I just know.
European members of parliament.
Okay, probably.
You'd be surprised what you find in the urine of European members of parliament.
So I don't know if that question is then a bit a joke or. So what I just know in general is, well, when you do a lot of samples and you try to find things, you can find AMPA, the phosphonate. And I just had a very long conversation with a farmer who was working for a big company that is producing different pesticides, and he said around 89% of all the phosphonates you can find going down the Rhine through Germany, they come from the household. So a phosphonate comes when you wash your hand, when you use soap, when you have a dishwasher, when you do your laundry. The highest levels in ppm ever found on this planet is in the dust in your house. It's not in the farmer, it's not on the soil, it's the dust that comes from all your clothes because you washed them. And that's there. There's no biology turning it down like in the soil. So, I mean, probably it's not perfect. Nothing in life is perfect, but all the alternatives are just worse. At least yet. Maybe in future we have something better. I don't know yet.
Thank you. And there's also another question considering herbicide, is that do you see a possibility to do no tillage without any herbicide use?
Not in my climate. So I know farmers like in Brazil that can do it long term. As well, there's a Rodel Institute, but then it works like 2 years, 3 years it works, and then it doesn't work anymore. I know a farmer in Austria and in France. Some of them can do no-till once or 3 years in an organic system without herbicides. Some can do it one of 2 years. I mean, it's way easier when you have enough water. Your cover crops can grow long enough, and you just roll them down. That helps already. That is maybe possible at my farm once of 10 years because we have low rainfall, and our winter is too heavy. The vegetation time is too short. When it's longer, then we still have this possibility what can help us. But all these so-called alternatives, if you use electricity to burn down things, if I would do that, it would take me 5 seconds and my whole field would be burning because it's so dry here. As well other methods of burning. And once I'm using the in German it's called Hacker. I'm not sure the English word when you do this very shallow tillage to just remove everything. All your advantages of no tool are gone in that moment. So yet I don't see ways. I know there is different sugars that can work as total herbicide, like a glyphosate. Some were even developed 15 years ago, but the trouble is it's natural, and something that is natural, you cannot put a patent on it. And but in the moment it's used on a farm, you need to do a biotox, and this biotox costs you like 30 million euro. So that means if you are the company that is so stupid to invest the 30 million euro to do this biotox and you cannot patent it, everybody can produce it after, but you had the expenses. And this is why it's not happening. But pretty interesting about the biotox is often the same chemicals when you have them in medicine, or even in your dishwasher. There's, for example, Azol in German. They don't need to do the biotox because it's not coming on the field. So there's many things going wrong in any kind of sense. So there would be alternatives. There's many things in our system would work different.
Thank you. Thanks for answering this question. And so there are two questions a bit looking forward, so to say. One of them is how can we best make sure that the regenerative farming voices are heard louder than those that say it can't be done?
Just keep talking. That's make your voice heard. That's the most simple answer, and I know it's in practice it's the most difficult. I think you would need a layered approach. I love the idea of like mentorship, like the groups that you are now starting. I think this is the way to really get farmers on board, because there is no advice as peer advice. So I think that's very good. We know that in the US that worked, that their regenerative farming took off because farmers were talking to each other. So please keep doing that. Second level is to do it at a coordinate way. There is, since December, there is a European Association of Regenerative Agriculture, EARA. So that would be something to look into, to really have your voice amplified. Also, please have your voice as a farmer heard at farmer organization. Copa Cogeca is not a big is not very big on regenerative agriculture, but if enough of their members are saying, please change your position, they are bound to. So also have your voice heard as much as possible, and find partners that are willing to amplify your voice. That can be EARA, the Farmers Organization for Regenerative Agriculture. It can be also your off-takers. If you are working together with supply chain actors, they are looking to elevate farmers who are doing this, especially the front runners.
I would also
And I guess
emphasize
that
share the word. I mean, there is, from my point of view, a lot a lot of myth around regenerative agriculture. Yeah, starting from that this is something esoteric up to the old, I would say, prejudices that this is delivering lower yield and higher costs and so on. I think it's good to have more role model examples, Alex, like you sharing sort of the experience and also sharing that this actually is sort of not say a booster for profitability, but certainly good in the long term, also financial aspect of a farm. Yeah, I think that is something where I feel in a lot of discussion that there is a complete different and wrong picture around in many people's minds and opinions. So.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone who asked the question and for the panelists for answering. And I think it's time for me to pass back to Anton for the conclusions.
Yeah, I think there's one question I saw that I think might be worth taking. Someone noticed, I think that's a good question. Somebody noticed that no-till was not part of the 5 principles of regenerative agriculture at the beginning of and that's, if that's correct, that's an interesting remark. Could you briefly explain that, or is that not the case?
this is the slide.
No-till is not one of the 5 principles.
Well,
and which is interesting. Why is that? That was a question that I saw, and it's an interesting question. I think it's the last question, and then I'll conclude because we're almost at 6:30.
It is a very simple answer, to be quite honest. I told you in the beginning that regenerative agriculture does not want to prescribe methods. So we don't prescribe what you can and can't use. You need to be very strict in that. So no-till is a method. We will not prescribe it, but to be quite honest, if you want to restore and maintain a healthy soil, so the 3rd principle, it is very difficult to do that if you keep tilling the ground, as Alexander explained very eloquently.
Okay, thank you. Right, well then we're nearly at the end. So again, I wish to thank Casper, Benjamin, Alexander for contributing their time and giving such an interesting presentations. I mean, you really have given us food for thought, and the pun is intended. And I think we here will digest it again, and I definitely see areas where we could possibly work together, or we could contribute to what you are doing, because what you're doing is a very much big picture work. And you have an impressive set of large companies and banks working with you, which is extremely interesting. But I think we can certainly contribute things. As mentioned, this idea of peer-to-peer mentoring, that's something we're working on as well. And this is, the idea is well developed in our group. The knowledge that we have of biodiversity conservation and of practical nature forms of nature-friendly farming in our group. The fact that we are a civil society, a network of civil society groups, both conservation NGOs and associations of nature-friendly farmers. So I can see possibilities of us contributing to your work. But let's think about it. Also, we will think about it internally, and we'd like to get back to you in the near future. And you're always very welcome also to send your thoughts to us and get in touch with us.
I will certainly do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Casper. Okay, so there we are. We reached the end, and thank you, audience, also for joining. And we will be uploading the recorded presentation to our webpage, so everybody has a chance to see it again if you want to look at some of the details of the different slides. And I wish everybody a good evening, and see you at the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay.